You know that feeling when you're doing something completely normal, something you've done hundreds of times, and then, for just a second, everything turns wrong? That is exactly what happened to me and my brother. One Friday night at a lake we used to fish. After what we saw, nothing about that lake felt normal ever again. My brother and I grew up fishing. There was this one lake we loved, not popular at all, mostly because it was hard to reach unless you were willing to hike through thick woods. Most locals ignored it, but that seclusion was exactly why we loved it. We could sit there for hours, just the two of us, rods in hand, catching bluegill after bluegill, while the rest of the world went about their Friday nights. We didn't fish at dawn like everyone else. Instead, we stayed out later, sometimes until after sunset. That night, we arrived just as the sun began to dip, our little spot on a cluster of rocks, ready for a long evening of fishing. Everything was normal, until it wasn't. I noticed movement across the lake. At first, I thought it was a big fish, but the ripples didn't make sense. I nudged my brother, JJ, and we both stared. That's when it happened. A dark shape began rising out of the water. It wasn't a fish. It was upright, far too big to be a fish. My heart jumped. Then I realized the truth. It was a person. The person had been submerged for who knows how long. My brother and I froze. The urge to leave was immediate, but a curious part of me wanted to watch. The figure swayed in the water rhythmically, almost hypnotically, moving fluidly, as if controlling the lake itself. Our fishing poles were forgotten. Was she fishing underwater? No, that didn't make sense. Was it a night swim? Impossible. The water was freezing. Minutes passed. She finally broke the surface again. And to my shock, it was a woman. Long brown hair, a dark green swimsuit, calm and confident, almost surreal. She looked about our age, maybe a year or two older. Then she smiled. Just like that, casually, as if nothing unnatural had happened. And she said, "Hi." We were speechless. JJ finally managed. What? What are you doing?" She laughed, teasing us. Swimming. Training. Then, the unthinkable. She glided closer, playful, and asked if we wanted to join her. My brain screamed no. My body wanted to move. But the water was freezing. My brother and I argued quietly, unsure whether to stay or leave. Seconds later, she screamed. Not a normal scream, a piercing, shrill shriek that froze our blood. She kept yelling, calling for us to come back, but the sound had a sharp, almost unnatural edge. We grabbed our gear and ran. My heart was hammering. By the time we reached the car, her screams still echoed in the woods. Police were called, but there was no trace of her, no explanation, just the lingering feeling of something wrong, something that didn't belong in that quiet lake. We eventually returned to the lake a few times, but always with my dad. The girl was never there again. I've tried to rationalize it. Maybe she was mentally ill, maybe some trick of the water and light. But deep down, I know she wasn't normal. And sometimes, late at night, I still wonder, what if she's still out there, waiting under the water, just beneath the surface? Fishing has always been one of my favorite things to do. 2 months ago, my friend Angel and I decided to go marsh fishing for speckled trout. The marshes near Louisiana are shallow and quiet, and we loved the peace. We took out my 2-person kayak early one spring morning. The water was freezing, but we didn't care. After about 30 minutes, we found a good spot and got right to fishing, cracking open a couple of beers and enjoying the calm. Everything was normal for about an hour. Angel caught something decent, and as he leaned over to get a better angle, his phone slipped from his pocket and fell into the murky water. He cursed and was frustrated. The replacement cost would be hundreds of dollars, and he didn't have it. I suggested we leave it and enjoy the day anyway, but Angel was determined. He decided to wade into the water barefoot, thinking he could feel around with his feet. The water came up to about 4.5 feet on him. It was freezing, but he started carefully probing the muddy bottom. Suddenly, he screamed. Not the usual startled scream, but one that made me freeze instantly. Before I could react, his body flipped forward and he disappeared beneath the surface. I jumped into action, stripping off my jacket and shoes, ready to dive in. But just as quickly, Angel burst up covered in thick mud, screaming at me to get out of the water. He was shaking, not from the cold, but from something else entirely. When I asked what happened, he explained in a panicked voice that something had grabbed his ankle and tried to drag him under. He insisted it wasn't a fish or an animal. It was something else, something he'd never felt before. He had to fight with everything he had to escape. We left immediately, his phone lost, but the terror of what he'd experienced stayed with both of us. For the next few weeks, every time I returned to the marsh, I felt the same sense of unease. Fishing, something I'd always found peaceful, suddenly had a dark edge to it. I've tried to explain it rationally. Maybe it was a catfish or an alligator gar. Maybe my mind was exaggerating. But Angel knew exactly what he felt, and so did I. Some things in the water aren't meant to be touched, and some experiences aren't meant to be explained. That day in the marsh, we were reminded of it the hard way. Some weekends, my friends and I like to look for adventure, and this particular Saturday evening was no different. It was me, Nick, Kat, and Megan, our usual group. Nick suggested we check out a small reservoir near Megan's house. We'd been there before, but something about it always felt hidden and secret, tucked away behind the woods, with county fences and no trespassing signs all around. Megan had cut a hole in the fence ages ago, and we always laughed about how we had this perfect little hideaway no one else knew about. The reservoir itself was quiet, almost too quiet. The water was clear, and a small sandy area along the edge made a perfect place to set up. Nick and I, obsessed with fishing, immediately set up our rods. Kat and Megan, more interested in chilling, spread out a blanket and started drinking, maybe considering a swim if they felt brave. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the water. Everything felt peaceful, until it didn't. Kat squinted across the shoreline and pointed. "Do you see that canoe?" she asked. None of us had noticed it before. It was wedged awkwardly among some reeds, looking like it had drifted there on its own. As we got closer, things got stranger. It wasn't empty. There was a half-eaten sandwich on the seat, an open tackle box, and a fishing rod still in the water. And then there was a phone, flashlight on, sitting on the main seat, locked. Who leaves a phone behind like that? None of us could explain it. As we discussed what to do, we noticed a figure on the far side of the reservoir, standing knee-deep in the water. Even though the sun had just set, we could see them clearly. They held something that looked like a stick or a fishing rod. But the terrifying part wasn't what they were holding. It was how still they were, watching us. Panic set in. We started moving back toward the fence, quickening our pace. That's when he started screaming at us. Not just yelling, a high, furious, insane scream, cursing and demanding we leave. My heart was racing, every instinct telling me to run. And then he moved into deeper water, swimming toward us. The fear hit like a wall. We ran, squeezing through the hole in the fence, half expecting him to follow. By the time we got to the car, our hearts were hammering. The screaming continued in the distance, but eventually faded. None of us knew who that man was, why he was there, or what he wanted. The abandoned canoe, the phone, the screaming. It made no sense. We haven't returned to that reservoir since. Sometimes I wonder if he's still there, watching from the water, waiting for the next group to stumble upon his hidden world. And every time I tell this story, my chest still tightens and my stomach drops. Because some encounters are meant to be feared, not explained.